I'd like to show you what can be achieved using very few tools and working in metal. Here's a couple I made earlier. Copper bracelets. Very few tools. Quite an effective little piece. Now, all that you really need: blowtorch, any sort of hammer really. This is a brick hammer, just happen to have one handy. One or two pieces for texturing, if you want to texture it. Small chisel. Obviously your raw material. Now this is 10mm copper tubing, used in, or used to be used, it's been superseded by plastic mostly now, in domestic plumbing for central heating, also known as microbore. Not an expensive item really. This I had left over from I don't know how many houses ago. It's been a complete roll, never been touched, so I'm going to make something from it. Now the first thing to do, it's pretty soft stuff, is to straighten some out, just using your hands. Not too bad to do. Just a bit of hand pressure. Get it in the vise. Don't need a vise, but it's handy. These are good if you can put your hands on a couple. Sharpies, silver, shows up well on metal of all sorts. Measure off 6.5 inches, which is about right for my wrist. I've got pretty big wrists, so you'd have to perhaps put a piece of paper around your wrist, not entirely round. You've got to leave a gap to enable you to put it on your arm. Junior hacksaw, that's too far away from the jaws of the vise there. Junior hacksaw, move the bolt of the vise out of the way, cut through it, nice and gentle, use the whole length of the saw, support the piece that's going to be cut off, otherwise it will bend. There you go, 6.5 inches. Sharp edges, be careful. Not big one on these over the top health and safety rules, but you've got to be aware that metal is often very sharp. I'll move that over the vise, get it out of the way. Now, the next thing is to heat this and quench it. When you heat copper and quench it, it does the opposite to steel. Steel generally goes harder, copper goes soft, like butter. Now, copper is a very good conductor of heat, so I wouldn't even think about holding this with gloves. Hold it with a pair of pliers or anything similar you got to hand. Once again, normal health and safety rules. You're going to be dealing with a naked flame, a very hot one. Use your common sense, don't point it anywhere silly, don't have any flammable liquids or materials in the vicinity. You can get auto ignition ones. Now I'm being careful, I'm not pointing that at the tools at the back. I've got a bucket of water off to my right here. I'm just going to heat this up until it's glowing a dull red. Normally I'd do this in the forge, but my forge isn't working yet. I haven't finished building it. This is slow, but it just shows what can be done with a minimum of tools. The hottest part of the flame is just where that inner blue flame ends, so that's where you want to have the metal. It's not good enough to heat the whole piece up in one go, so I'll do it in halves. The light's not very good in here, which is to our advantage because I can see it's starting to glow red. It's starting to glow dull red now. And as soon as it gets up to that sort of temperature, I'm just going to go off camera for a second and plunge it in this bucket of cold water. No, nearly there. You can see a nice sort of dull cherry red there. There we go. I think I knocked the tripod as well then. Okay, that should be cold now. It cools down very quickly, but just check it before you touch it, you know, hold it. Same with the other end now. Nice cherry red. Take a second or two to boil the water off that's inside the tube. That will keep cooling it down. That's why the steam's coming out the top. You'll get all sorts of horrible colours while you do this when you quench it, but don't worry about that, we'll get rid of that later. Here we go, you can hear the water boiling off inside. It's starting to approach the right colour. There we go, we're okay at the top. Make sure we get the middle bit. I'm going to quench it now. Okay, turn the blowtorch off, put it somewhere sensible where you won't knock into it. Okay, now, quite cool, this now is very soft indeed compared to what it was before. And what we need to do now is flatten that. Now it just so happens I have here, and you may not have exactly this, but I'm sure you'll find something similar, a rather large piece of channel. It's heavy. Oh dear, that's heavy. Okay, any sort of metal will do as long as it's a bit substantial. Put him on the top, and then we need a piece of wood to go on top of it. And put your piece of wood on top. Hit it a few times smartly with a hammer. And that's pretty well flattened it. You can see there's ridges here where it hasn't quite flattened. We'll deal with that now. And what you need next is a piece of steel. This is a piece I've cut off a car leaf spring, a Land Rover leaf spring. Any steel will do. This is tool steel, well, similar kind of thing to tool steel. Repeat the procedure with the steel on. Now that is fairly flat. Now the problem we've got now is that will have gone hard through being worked. So we have to anneal it again, that is heat it up and cool it down again. We just repeat the procedure with the blowtorch. Should be a bit quicker this time because you haven't got the chimney effect of the tube to carry the heat away. It'll be quicker this time. There you go, it's going dull red, it's all cherry red at the top. I think it was a bit hard still in the middle there last time I did it. I concentrate a bit more on the bottom part, keep wafting the flame up to the top to keep the top hot. Obviously the rising heat from the bottom will help to heat the top. There we go, it's a nice colour now. Much quicker this time. I'm going to quench that. Check it's definitely cold. Repeat the procedure on the other side. The other end, sorry. Again, you've got some water that goes inside. Obviously keep it cool for a little while until you drive off all the water. Starting to colour now. Okay, I'm going to quench that now. There we go. That should be soft again now. Yeah, look at that, very soft. Easy, it's like butter. Easily move it with your hands. Okay. Now the next thing is, would we like, actually I could do with a little bit more flattening, to be honest. Maybe it wasn't quite soft last time. That's better. A bit more on this edge. Now that will have re-hardened it a little bit. Not too much though. Okay, now, obviously it's not quite even. Perhaps you can see the edges aren't quite even. Bit of blacksmithing stuff now, just ever so gently. Work it a bit. Almost like on an anvil. That's better, a bit more on the end. That's not too bad. It's quite straight. Now, texturing. If you put a piece of wood underneath it, that allows the tool you're using to texture to penetrate the copper more. Now on this one I'm going to use just a fairly sharp metal chisel, just to put a few striations in it, random. To give it a bit of texture and a bit of interest. You can do all sorts of pretty patterns using all sorts of fairly everyday objects. You can see it's curling up now because when you hit it you're stretching the metal, and obviously that makes it form into a curve. Flatten it a bit more. Now we'll send him flat again, nice and gently, mind your fingers. Once again that will have work hardened, a little bit tedious having to anneal it with a blowtorch instead of pop it in a forge for about 15 seconds, but this is for people who haven't got a forge, who fancy having a go at something. Very easy to do, it's a little bit time consuming, but no, not a problem. So once more, keep ourselves away from the heat. Direct contact with it anyway. And let's get him warmed up again. Pretty well the last heat now, maybe one more after this. He's going, turning colour. There we go. Don't get it halfway down. Ready for quenching. Quench well. Always check it's cold. Believe me, I've got one on this finger somewhere. Did the other day. Oh, it's largely gone. You can end up with quite a few burns if you're not careful. If you do burn yourself, standard first aid procedure, get it in cold water, preferably a running tap, and you won't believe this if you've never done it, but 15 minutes is the minimum. After 2 or 3 minutes you'll think, oh, that's okay now. You come away from the tap, suddenly it starts stinging again. That means it hasn't cooled down. All the heat that's gone inside your skin hasn't come out. You've really got to keep it in that water, under running water preferably, 15 minutes. Never put ice on it. Worst thing you do for a burn. Don't put butter on it, old wives' tale. All you'll do is fry. In fact, don't put anything on it. If it's a really bad one, get yourself to the doctor or the hospital. But standard first aiding is 15 minutes. Seems like an eternity, but believe you me, in the next day or two you'll be grateful you did it. Righto, first aid lesson over. Back to quenching this now, yep. There we go. Okay, got all sorts of horrible colours. That's quite warm still, actually. It's not enough to burn me, but it's quite warm. Okay, so that's our side we've textured a little bit. This is the side we haven't. Now we're going to move over to the polishing mop. Cheap as chips, these. Bought this from Screwfix. I think it was £34 including VAT. It came with guards and 2 8-inch grinding wheels, which was very nice actually, but I took all those off. I've mounted a wire brush with the original arbors. That's these metal discs here. Big bolt on the end. Make sure it's done up, obviously. Don't get your fingers near it. If you're not happy, get some gloves on. Get yourself out the line of the machine, so if any bits fly off, they won't strike your body. Wear eye protection, definitely. Your sight is precious. Do not risk it. To both sides. Hold your finger there. Okay. I hope you can see. Look at that lovely finish on that. Got a few striations from our chiseling, which gives it, you know, some interest. So, next thing is to take these corners off. Now, I've experimented various different ways of doing this. I've tried pliers, I've tried a grindstone, and so far all my methods have resulted in quite sharp edges, which have been the devil to get rid of. Now, whilst I was cleaning this bench up before we started this, I spotted my very trusty, old but quite expensive tin snips. Now, if there's a shortcut to a job and you've got one handy, I'm all for it. I've not tried this before, so let's see what happens. I'm hoping to create a bit of a curve. Nope, just going to take the edges off just like a pair of pliers. Bit more. Bit more, bit steeper. Uneven, not to worry. We'll put that straight. Same again. Okay, now I'm going to go to the grindstone. I'm going to ease those off, probably touch the faces, ease the corners off, touch the faces, try and get rid of the sharp edges, because we don't want sharp edges on it if we're going to wear it. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, rounded the edges off, the ends off. See, there's some sharp edges there. I've got to get rid of those. No good for the job. Now, another word to the wise, when you touch this to a grindstone, you're probably holding it here somewhere, work in the edge. So you've got the grindstone running there, work in the edge like that to get your curve. And you repeat on that side like that. Now, on the tool rest, obviously. Now, believe you me, this will get hot pretty quick. Have a jug of cold water next to your workbench, next to your grinder. As soon as you feel the heat's approaching, you dunk it in the water, because in the next few seconds it'll have gone past your fingers and become too hot to hold. Right, now we're going to get rid of the burrs, shall we say, burrs on the edge of this work. Bit of sandpaper on the block. Little file. Copper's very soft to work. That's why plumbers use it. And if you know that the word plumber derives from the word plum in Latin, which means lead, and you may know that all plumbing work originally was done in lead. And of course that includes drinking water, so it's hardly surprising that people didn't have problems from it. But that's where the word plumber comes from. History lesson over. I'm happy to test the sharp edges with my tough callous skin. It's my work. If I cut myself, that's my problem. But you know, use your loaf. Don't be silly. Sharp metal can cut like a razor blade if you're not careful, especially if you've got soft skin. If you're young or you haven't done much of this sort of work in your life. Right, final finish off with the old sandpaper. Oh. You can keep working at that till it's really, really smooth and you're happy with it. Anyway, there we go. Now, it's not, it's reasonably soft because we've worked it again, haven't we? Now, I'm going to have to anneal it again to do this properly. So, let's fire up the blowtorch once more. This should be the last time. Always keep trying to remember to put the lighter back in my pocket where I'm going to be able to find it again. So, last go now, very last go. Of course this will discolour it all, so we could have missed out the polishing a while back, done it at the end, but I just wanted to show you how it's starting to look. If you're interested in horror stories with power tools, I'm about to record a video of how I had, well, what could have been a fatal accident with an angle grinder. No doubt about it, all my own faults. I learnt a very, very hard lesson there. It's a bit graphic, so if you're young or squeamish, don't watch it. I'll be doing that after this. Right, we're at pretty hot temperature now. That'll do, quench him. I'm also going to do a series of 30-second videos on top tips for blacksmiths. And I've been taught simple things that will make you working a lot easier. Mostly matters of self-discipline, but useful little tips as taught to me by a very, very highly regarded blacksmith, highly regarded in the world in fact, not just the UK. a master blacksmith, no doubt, no less. Okay, nearly ready now. Okay, quench it now. Okay, it's a little bit warm, that'll soon go. Now, once more, that's very soft, so we'll just polish it again. I'm not going to move the camera this time, you saw it last time, it won't take me a second. There we have the finished article. That's the reverse side, the side we didn't put the finishing on. And now a grand fitting to the wrist. Now, big wrist, get it fairly well central. It'll bend here and here, obviously. So start to bend it round your wrist. When you get to those 2 points, stop. And then start to shape it into a nice curve. I've got pretty strong hands, so it's not too much of an effort for me to do this. You might find it different, you might have to put it in a vise, but you want basically a bit of a big C shape really. Okay, now put it on the wrist. Like I said, I've got a big wrist. There we go. All fitted. Nice copper bracelet for a friend, relation, maybe a Valentine's present. And it's personal, there's not another one like that in the world. Not the same anyway. Well, thanks for watching. Catch you soon. Bye bye.